right, it says we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Manfred Wendt, and today I'm here as a volunteer of the Young Conservatives Texas Political Action Committee. We are the largest conservative organization at the college level in the state of Texas. And with me today is Shelby Slauson and Jennifer Fleck. Shelby, can you start off by introducing yourself?
Yes, and thank you for being here with us today. I'm Shelby Slauson. I hail from the deep red heart of Central Texas, and I'm running to serve as the next state representative for House District 59, which includes 8 counties. That's Comanche, Coryell, Erath, Hamilton, McCullough Mills, San Saba, and Somerville.
And then also with us is Jennifer Fleck.
Thanks. My name is Jennifer Fleck. I'm running for HD 47, which is Western Travis County. It encompasses the areas around Lake Travis and then curls down to Onion Creek, Shady Hollow, and Circle C. And I'm excited about running and taking this district back to red.
And thank you so much, Shelby, for opening us up today with a wonderful prayer. And with that, this town hall we're doing is going to have easy questions, going to have fun questions, but it's also going to have difficult, complex questions. We're going to start off today with a very controversial, hard fastball. So what are the top 3 barbecue places in your district, starting off with Jennifer?
In my district. So, of course, I love It's All Good because it's like 5 minutes from here and it's really yummy. Other good barbecue. I don't know the name of it, but there's like a barbecue shack at Four Corners that's right in front of the 7-Eleven. I don't know the name of it, but they have great sandwiches. It's really yummy. And I don't know. I love Opie's, but Opie's is just right outside of my district technically. So yeah, that's it.
We'll work on that when the maps get redrawn. Yeah. And then Shelby?
Oh, this is a very difficult political question, and I would like to lodge an objection to it. So in no particular order, I'm going to say Hard 8 in Stephenville, Max Barbecue in Brady, and there's 2 in Gatesville, and I really don't want to have to pick between the 2 of them, so I'm just going to say both of the barbecue joints in Gatesville are fantastic.
Well, as someone who worked on Congressman Chip Roy's congressional run last cycle, it is always very hard to decide the best barbecue places in the district. My personal favorite was always Buzzy's in Kerrville. So with that, why do you guys consider yourselves to be conservative, starting with Shelby?
For me, it's probably largely a product of my raising in a very conservative Christian household. There was a strong emphasis on the Bible and on faith and on biblical principles. And then we were also a family that my dad was a very hard worker. We had everything that we needed, but we weren't extravagant or rich by any means. And so the mindfulness about how you spend the dollars that you have and the means that you live within just really provided some financial perspective that isn't often replicated in our government.
Yeah, we are in so much national debt that my great-grandchildren won't be paying it off. Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, for you, what is the reason why you consider yourself to be a conservative?
I never really considered myself to be political and wasn't raised in a political family, and probably never would have called myself a conservative until more recently, where that labeling came along for me. Like Shelby, we grew up, I come from mobile homes and small farmhouses, and I remember my grandpa used to rake the dirt. I mean, everything was pristine and clean, but again, not extravagant. And my family worked hard. My grandparents worked hard every single day. I was raised by, most of my life, I was raised by a single mom who worked every single day and provided for us. And so we never were in debt. And that's the model that I follow even today. And so just small government, that's kind of turned into it. And then also, again, like Shelby, biblical principles. I'm for family, I'm for fathers, I'm for marriage, I'm for protecting children's innocence. And to me, those are common sense principles. If that makes me a conservative, I guess that's what I am.
I noticed you guys both touched on your Christian faith. What are your favorite Bible verses / parables / biblical stories? Starting with Jennifer.
So my favorite, I have a lot of good verses that I love in the Bible, of course. But one thing that I rely on is, and I might get the numbers wrong, but Psalms 27:13, I think it says, be strong and courageous, and that God doesn't disappoint. and that we're supposed to live a full life, essentially, is what it says. But don't be disappointed. God is good. Be strong and courageous. So.
And then Shelby?
There's two that I reflect on a lot during the campaign. And one is, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is necessary for building others up, that it may benefit those who listen. And that's a particular challenge in a campaign. So it's one that I focus quite a lot on. And then there's another, I believe it's in Colossians, that says that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And I think that that's particularly important for us to keep that at the forefront of our mind, no matter what is going on in this world. It's temporal. He is before it. He is in it. So.
Thank you. And my personal favorite, top two parables is the man, or not a parable, but the man to the right of Jesus on the cross. So to me, it was evidence that you can be saved no matter how late. And then the woman at the well. And with that, let's go into a little bit more legislative stuff. What are your top three priorities in Austin, Shelby?
Property taxes are a huge issue. They touch every single person in our district, regardless of whatever, really whatever political persuasion you belong to. And then pro-life is a big issue for me. I am a strong believer that a life is created by God with a purpose, and that we have a moral obligation to stand for the protection of that life from conception until natural death. And I am a staunch Second Amendment defender. So,
thank you. And then Jennifer?
So all of those things are very important to me, and I promise to be an advocate on strengthening the Second Amendment or defending it, protecting life. Also, property taxes are a big deal in this district. We have a lot of, because we're further from the city, we have a lot of retired homeowners that are hurt by high property taxes. But as most of my supporters know, the way that I got involved in politics is that I was a parent who pushed back against graphic sex ed and gender confusion in the schools, especially elementary age. And so I worked on that issue as an advocate or an activist for the last 4 sessions, and didn't really see much movement from our legislature. And so that is my kind of driving force and why I'm coming, and I will do something about it. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, for specifics, if there was one law you could change, get rid of, or pass, what would it be? Start with Jennifer.
So for me, kind of in the same vein, I would strengthen parental authority and transparency when it comes to schools. So again, that's an issue that I work a lot on, and I'm involved with a lot of parents in different school districts across the state. And so I see parents' authority and being subverted by our government, schools, and so I would strengthen parental transparency and parental authority when it comes to education, especially.
Thank you. And then Shelby?
if I could do just one thing, it's going to be to secure the border, because I think that would have implications on several other issues, like the taxes that we pay and the effect on our healthcare system and on our school system.
And then do you think that illegal immigrants should receive in-state tuition?
No, in fact, that's one of the first 10 bills that I would file, is to end that, because until we actually take assertive steps to disincentivize that illegal crossing, then we aren't actually addressing the problem.
And then Jennifer?
I agree. I'm not for illegal immigrants getting in-state tuition.
Thank you. And then Rachel Miller in the audience, would be remiss if we didn't ask some Second Amendment questions. So what are your stances on red flag gun laws? Starting with Jennifer.
So I'm opposed to red flag gun laws. I will be a proponent for constitutional carry. And in 2019, that bill was filed by Stickland and didn't even get a hearing. So I think we just need, I'm praying for more support from our legislature in the House and the Senate. I think that's going to take a lot of conservative freshmen getting elected, and just some bold legislators that are willing to push back against cultural lies.
Thank you. And then Shelby?
I am a pistol packing mama. I carry regularly. I do not support red flag laws.
And then what's your favorite gun to carry?
Well, that's a very personal question to ask a gal. But I will answer. an LCP2, a little Ruger. It's a very nice lady-sized.
And then Jennifer, do you have preference on firearms?
I don't even know how to answer that question. No.
So do you support or oppose returning the age to purchase nicotine products to 18?
I support returning the age, although I'm not in favor of nicotine. I'm not in favor of cigarettes. But if you can serve in the military at 18, if you can vote at 18, then I am in favor of allowing nicotine purchase at 18. Yes.
And then Shelby?
I agree with that. I think it's a liberty issue, and particularly the issue of if you're old enough to serve in the military, you're old enough to have the autonomy to make that decision for yourself. I would hope that many more would make a health decision not to use nicotine, but liberty.
Thank you. And what do you believe the state's role in education should be?
Well, I think constitutionally, Texas is required to provide an education to the children in the state. Beyond that we ought to provide a quality education. Now, I'm very blessed out in rural Texas that we have solid schools. I love the schools that my children are in. I'm probably a little biased because I grew up in those same schools. But I'm a public education proponent.
Thank you. And then Jennifer?
So I am also for public education. I was raised in public schools and got a very good education. I have a 30-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So I've had a child in public schools for a very long time. And I have watched public education change over the last 20 years. And I would like to see it change back. So I am not for children being on electronic devices all the time. And I am not for social emotional learning. I'm for rigorous academics. So I do think they have a role. I think we just have to return to the role that is academics. Yeah.
Thank you. And then recently, what made big news in Texas was the COVID contact tracing contract. What do you think about contract tracing pertaining to COVID-19? Seeing as we're in a completely uncharted territory as far as anyone who's been alive for in this country has seen. We haven't seen this sort of activity since the Spanish flu, so we're all kind of still learning on the go.
Right. So for a very long time, I have been for opening Texas. I think that the COVID-19 was exaggerated and inflated, the whole discussion around it. Although I don't think it's not real, I think it was exaggerated. I am not and will never be for contact tracing. I try to think of an instance where I would submit to a test. And the only instance I can think of is like if I was going to visit my granddaughter in California and they said, well, you have to take a test in order to get on the plane. Well, I want to see her, I would take a test. But if they then asked me, who have I been around? Who is my family? Who are my friends? That's not happening. I'm not answering those questions. And so I'm not for contact tracing. Or paying for it. And some people are like, well, those are federal dollars. Those aren't state dollars. And I'm like, well, are we just printing money?
At this point, yes.
Yes. So
Yes, we are.
I'm not for accepting federal dollars either for contact tracing. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Shelby?
In addition to that, some of the concerns that I have focus on how this could affect some of our businesses that are reopening and what that might mean as hotspots are identified based on tracing people back to a particular business location that may not actually have anything to do with the transmittal of a virus that isn't as deadly as we were originally very fearful of. Now, there's an illness out there. There absolutely is. But I do not in any regard favor a contact tracing program that tracks Americans. I don't think that it will be effective for us to in any way address the virus. And it's a substantial amount of money for taxpayers to have to put the bill on.
Thank you. And then with this COVID-19 shutting down the economy, obviously Texas's budget is going to be in a huge crunch between shutting down Texas and also what's happening out in our oil fields with that tragedy. What do you plan on doing to help make Texas fit its constitutional requirement to have a balanced budget next session? Shelby?
That's going to be very difficult. It's absolutely going to be an economy-focused session. Now, one thing that's going to do is start really revealing to us where are our needs versus where our wants are. And I think that we are ripe for that conversation anyway before this virus, but it's going to push us in that direction. There's no doubt that there's things that we spend money on in Texas that fall into a want category. So, that gets a little touchy for some people, because if I start saying, arts are great, but should they be taxpayer funded? People have different opinions. But then when you start prioritizing, what should the state absolutely be focused on? Infrastructure, law and order, public education. You have to start prioritizing where those are at. And at the same time, we have a population in Texas that is clamoring for some meaningful property tax relief. So we can't continue to grow the size of our government and tax our people. And a lot of my district has been touched by those oil and gas downturns. So we have people who are out of work from COVID closures and out of work from oil and gas layoffs. So it's hurting.
And then Jennifer?
Yeah, no, I agree. So I know Senator Nelson recently talked about zero budget, balancing the budget using zero-based budgeting, so that the agencies have to come in and start their budget at zero to justify everything that they want. So I think that's a great start. We should have been doing that long before now. So people get super offended when I say that there are good aspects to COVID, and so I'm just going to irritate people more. But this could be like a good result from the COVID situation, is it forces us to spend less and cut some programs. And I also know that the Freedom Caucus recently started a program, and I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like Texas Waste Basket or Bucket or something like that, where they're going to ask agencies or people to anonymously call in and confess, hey, this is where we're overspending. I have personal knowledge of this. This is wasteful. And so I think that's a good start to cutting costs and expenses. Yeah.
The Freedom Caucus is wonderful. Makes my job much easier when it comes to endorsements. And so with that, what qualities are you looking for in the next Speaker of the House, since you will be hopefully voting on that? Jennifer?
Well, I would love a conservative. However, there are very few, which is one of the reasons why I'm running. And I know that might offend some people, but it's okay. That's my life experience. That's my experience, not based on anything anybody's told me. My experience is that we have very few conservatives in the legislature, in the Senate and in the House. So I would love a conservative if that's possible. I want somebody who will align with the Republican platform, because again, I've served as a precinct chair, I've gone to county convention, I've testified at state convention. So that is where the grassroots and the people are involved and engaged. Those are real people that are creating the Republican platform. And that's what needs to be followed. When they put forth legislative priorities, that's what the people want. Mm-hmm. So I want a speaker that will align with and who will be committed to assigning those bills to committees, pushing those through committee. And, I've been told for a long time, because I've been an activist for a long time, that things take forever. Like it takes 3 or 4 sessions to get things through, or more. You just have to keep trying. The legislature is about killing bad bills, not advancing good bills. That's all a lie. I bought into it for a long time. It's a lie. If leadership wants something to happen, it will happen. So we have Republican leadership. We should have Republican priorities advanced.
Thank you. And if you doubt her statement on conservatives, feel free to go to yct.org and check out our legislative ratings. You'll probably be disappointed. And then Shelby, you're up.
And on that note, I think across the board, not just in the speakership, but we need authentic conservatives. We have an absence of that. We have a lot who talk the talk, but once people are down in Austin, that's not the way votes are cast. And it's not just in that speakership, it's throughout the chamber as well. But absolutely, in selecting a speaker, it's incumbent upon Republicans to choose someone who has the boldness required to advance some of those priorities.
Thank you. And as activists and lifelong Texans, what for you is the biggest indicator of the difference between a conservative Republican and what we would call a rhino, Republican in name only.
Shall I?
You're
Go for it.
first. You're first.
It's your turn.
So, every other year, my mailbox is filled with mailers that talk about being tough on the border, pro-life, a fighter for the taxpayer. But when I personally review the record, or I sit down in the chamber in Austin and I watch what's actually going on there, the votes that are cast do not line up with that story that is told to me at the mailbox. And that is so frustrating and disheartening. And it's very difficult for the average person out in Central Texas who is working hard for a living, raising their family, paying their bills, minding their business, honoring their God, to sort through all of that and understand what's really happening. And ultimately, the way the charade keeps getting played is those special interest dollars that continue to fund those mailers, that continue to tell us a story that doesn't align with the truth in the voting record.
Thank you. And then Jennifer?
So the biggest difference between rhinos and conservatives to me is rhinos will, okay, I don't know how to say this nice. So Democrats at least are honest, in my opinion. Like when I go into a Democrat's office, they barely even acknowledge me. I must be in a catalog somewhere. I don't really know. But they obviously and visibly aren't for me. And I kind of appreciate the honesty. When I walk into a Republican's office, many times they give me talk or what we call a seat at the table. But then they don't really follow through. And so when I take them conservative bills that I've written or that I know about, they'll be like, well, if you can find somebody to file it, then we'll help you. Knowing it's hard to get a legislator to file your bill. It's hard. And so then I get them all filed, 3 in 2019. I get 3 bills filed by conservative legislators. I go back around to all those, mostly men, no offense men, all those men who said that they would help me if I could get them filed, and they avoid my calls and they avoid my texts and they don't want to see me. That's a rhino. Like if just do what you say. That's the difference between a conservative and a rhino to me.
Thank you. And then why did you decide to run? It seemed like that question really fired both of y'all up. So why did you decide to run, Jennifer?
So without repeating myself and just adding to that, there came a moment during the 2019 session where I did not feel represented as a parent. I did not feel represented as a female, and I did not feel represented as a conservative. And every week that I went back to the Capitol, I felt more and more disenchanted, more and more defeated, and more nauseous. And combine that with my district has been represented by a Republican for a very long time. It just flipped in 2018. Representative Goodwin, who is my representative now, is a very liberal representative. She's not for anything that I'm for. It's a good season in my life. I've raised my children. I work from home. It's just everything kind of started to come together for me where this was a great opportunity for me to now run. And then the moment I was at the Texas Family and Life Value, Texas Values, Faith and Family Day outside the Capitol. And the speaker said, "Isn't it a great day to be in Texas?" Except for Austin. "Isn't it a great day to be in Texas?" And I was like, oh, hell no, I am not letting Austin go. And so that was it. That moment, I was like, I'm running. Yeah.
Thank you, Shelby.
Well, for me, I come from, like I said, that ruby red heart of Texas. And where I'm at, we are so red that we elected Trump by 81% and Ted Cruz by 82%. We're not playing about our redness in Central Texas. So it is extremely out of sync for our district that for the last 8 years, our representative has ranked every session at the bottom of the conservative index that is compiled by Rice University. And you see that one year and you think, well, that's an oddity, but you see it the second session and it's the same, and the third and the fourth, and you start looking at voting records to figure out why is this happening? And I was very disheartened by that because I know that our people truly believe in God and in the Constitution and in the Second Amendment and in the sanctity of life and a secure border and in personal responsibility that allows them just to direct the course of their own life through hard work and effort. And there are so many issues that are important to our people that unfortunately our rep has colluded with the Democrats in a variety of ways to undermine legislation that's important to our people. And I couldn't take it any longer after sitting down there and watching it in person and knowing the disconnect. So I started to wonder, honestly, is this truly what our district wants? Because maybe it's just me who's out of line. And so I started spending quite a bit of time out on doors, just opening that conversation with citizens about what's important to you. And do you know that that's not what's happening down in Austin on your behalf?
Thank you. And then do you guys believe that it was a mistake by local governments to force closure of the place of worship during the corona pandemic?
100%. Now, I do believe that early on we needed to do something to make sure that we were adequately protecting our health. But as a liberty lover, I want to be educated on the best practices for myself and my family. And I want to be responsible for making those decisions for myself. And I think that there's a particular danger, as we have seen, when you force the closure of churches, you are interjecting the state right there in the middle of religion. And I think that our founding fathers would be rather surprised at the direction that we took in closing churches.
Thank you. And Jennifer?
So I'm definitely opposed to closing the churches. However, I don't believe that the church is a building. I believe that the church is people. And I've been knocking doors, like Shelby, a lot of doors. And I do encounter doors where I go to a church that has 3 campuses in this district, so it's a very well-known church, and I'll come to the door and they'll be like, "Oh, Jennifer, I know you. We go to the same church." And I'm like, "Awesome." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sad that like we're not meeting on Sundays." And they're like, "Oh, there's like 12 of us that meet in the driveway down the street every Sunday morning, and we worship together and we sing together and we have church." And so I still believe that church is possible. I do miss fellowshipping together, and I look forward to when we're all meeting again, for sure.
Well, there is some benefit to living like the earlier Christians, or the very early Christians. So with that, we're going to move to a more touchy subject, what's happened recently with George Floyd and all of that. Obviously, it's a tragedy, terrible situation. We hope the family heals. We hope that our country heals. And we hope that we solve the problems that have caused this crisis to happen over and over and over again, because enough is enough. It's time for this to end. With that, what are your thoughts on Minneapolis abolishing its police department, starting with Shelby?
Well, I think first and foremost, acknowledging a horrible act that led to the wrongful murder of a man is very important for us. And I think it's very unfortunate that some meaningful conversation has been completely overshadowed by some actors who would use that to instead incite lawlessness and rioting and looting, and some very important conversations are not happening. I do not support the defunding or the disbanding of police by any stretch. I do not think that that's the answer. I certainly don't want to see that happen in Texas.
Thank you. And then Jennifer?
Yeah, no, I'm not for defunding the police. I think it's, again, a terrible thing that happened, but many, hundreds of thousands of egregious acts happen all the time, not necessarily at the hands of police, but violence that we can be addressing. And so it's unfortunate that they've elevated this one instance to something that then creates violence and looting and destruction. So again, the media, we've been played, and again.
And then with that, we've started to have a national conversation about police unions and how police unions can often, we all know that the vast majority of police are good and honorable, but however, this death was a tragedy. And that has brought to the forefront a discussion of how police unions allow bad actors to escape consequences for their actions. So how would you guys like to address the issue of police unions being used to protect bad cops?
Well, I don't think that we should ever protect a bad actor, but I don't want to confuse that in any stretch with the honorable service of thousands and thousands of men and women who are out in unimaginable circumstances right now protecting the rest of us.
So, like schools, so school districts have like like almost like sovereign immunity. So when a parent has been grieved, it's difficult for that parent to bring a grievance against the school district and get any change because nobody has jurisdiction over them. They can break the law. So just like school districts, I feel the same way about the police unions, or if they're protecting bad actors. They should not be protected. They shouldn't have immunity. If they do something wrong, citizens should be able to bring a grievance against that officer. So I know, and also, the Sandra Bland Act, that was some criminal justice reform that we tried to get through in 2019. And I've read a lot of different commentary on that. It should have passed. It would have been good for our citizens. It would have been good reform. And there was some discussion that police PACs were pushing back against that legislation. So we can't allow police unions to interfere with needed criminal justice reform.
Thank you. And what happened obviously was a tragedy, and let's hope that our Texas legislators can lead the charge in January and next session, help fix that problem, make sure it doesn't happen in Texas, and serve as a model for the United States to work to solve this crisis, and put it finally into the history books for the United States. And with that, in recent weeks, there's also been a lot of rioters, especially targeting historic monuments. Just today, A&M's big monument was graffitied and mutilated. Do you believe that those involved in these acts should be prosecuted?
I do. I'm a national monument movement advocate. Again, we had legislation that we tried to pass in 2019. It failed. It didn't make it through to protect our monuments. And so I definitely think that those people should be prosecuted for defacing our monuments.
Thank you. And with that, we're getting close to the end of our session. So Jordan, if you could pass out note cards and collect some questions from the audience. And then with that, there's been a lot of push by specifically far left Democrats to have vote by mail. Do you believe Texas should have vote by mail?
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Unequivocal, no, we should not. And I'm so grateful that our Attorney General is fighting hard against a whole series of lawsuits filed by the Democrats to advance that very thing. I mean, we know that the whole purpose of that effort, using the coronavirus as the excuse, is to make it easier to harvest those votes and commit voter fraud and change the outcome of elections in Texas.
There we go. Camera's back.
We're back. So,
yeah.
And then Jennifer?
I'm not for expanding vote by mail. There are certain criteria that a voter can meet. So over 65, disability, or out of town. I think that those are reasonable accommodations for voters. I'm knocking doors every single day, and I would say that the Republican voter overall doesn't want that. The people don't want that, and they're fine if you can stand in line at a grocery store. You can stand in line to vote, and they're ready to go vote. So I think we should take a poll of the people, right? The people don't want vote by mail.
I'll tell you, absolutely, within my district, people do not want vote by mail. And we were actually, a few weeks ago, we were pretty shocked when the incumbent for this district held his own town hall, selected his own questions to answer, and somebody asked his opinion on whether or not to expand vote by mail. And in the course of answering that question, he said that other states have figured out the security. They clearly know how to do the vote counting, and it's an interesting idea that will be discussed more in the next session. That same week is when Ken Paxton was fighting those lawsuits filed by the Democrats for that same thing. So that's just an example of being out of touch and out of sync with conservative values.
Thank you. And then obviously with campaigns, there's a lot of interesting moments, special moments. What is the most special moment you've had so far in your campaign, Jennifer? One you're going to tell your kids about years from now?
It's funny because I door knock almost every day. I come home and my kids and my husband, they always want to hear, they're like, okay, what were the fun stories today? And so I would say every single day, the voters, surprise to me is not the right word, delight me. Like they're just delightful. I come to the door, they open the door and they're like, Jennifer, I have a shirt on that says my name. So it's so not fair because I don't know their name, but they're like, Jennifer. I mean, they hug me. I've had voters pray. I've had voters at the door pray over me. I've had voters at the door cry. when we just start having a discussion about government and about things that are really important to them. I've had voters who are out in the yard, and I'll drive up and I'll start to get out, and they're like, you already have our vote. Keep going. Keep going. We need you. Keep going. And so I can't pick a moment, but I will tell you that knocking doors is my very, very favorite part of campaigning. My very favorite part. I love it. And when I feel discouraged, or I feel like I can't do it, or I feel like I don't know enough, or I don't know anything, I go to the door and I feel it's like they build me up again. So I just love them. So that's not a moment, but the door.
I think that's the heart of a grassroots, people-driven person, because that's hands down my favorite too. The worst part of Corona has been the time when I had to not show up on people's doors. And at first, I probably shouldn't say this, but at first I was surprised how many prayers were offered. But there's something about when you show up with an open ear and you're offering a piece of yourself, they will offer that same back, the things that are on their heart. And it's not always political. Sometimes it's just very personal things. And there was one particular moment when I was in a very rural part of our district that I'm told a lot. No one ever comes to my door to ask what I think.
Yeah.
And this gentleman, he's widowed a couple of years now, and was dealing with some health issues. And it was right before Christmas time, and he had a Christmas tree set up in the corner, and there's pictures all over the walls of these memories shared in a lifetime with that wife that he was grieving. And he told me that on the table there next to his chair was his property tax bill, and that it was several $100s more than last year. And in light of everything going on, he didn't know how he was going to pay that. And it was so overwhelming to have that confidence shared, and to sit there in the stillness of this home and hear this very personal story. And it's those kinds of things that I pick up and I carry, and you just absorb those stories along the way.
For sure.
But I'll also say I remember every single place that has served me a baked good, cookies, snacks. Those are very plentiful out there too, and very appreciated.
Yeah.
Jordan, can you bring the questions forward?
Yeah, there's still a couple outstanding, but
With the oil price crash and the COVID shutdown, obviously the state of Texas will face a huge budget shortfall. How will you respond to calls to legalize gambling and marijuana to increase state revenue? Shelby?
No. And no.
Easy answer. Jennifer?
I am opposed to legalizing marijuana. I'm for medical marijuana. Senator Donna Campbell introduced a bill that I would have voted for. I'm not diametrically opposed to legalizing gambling. I would have to see the bill and see what that encompasses, and I would need a lot more information.
Yep, gambling is always a risk.
Yeah.
Once you are
Right.
once people get elected, oftentimes we feel like there's suddenly a wall between them and the grassroots. Once you are elected as a grassroots candidate, what will you do to make sure the grassroots stay involved and you don't forget your roots? Shelby?
Okay, I love the grassroots, and I love talking to people. And one of the things that I do on all my materials on the website, I have my personal cell phone out there. And every now and then I get, and it's been my cell phone for over a decade. I don't even know how long now. So every now and then I'll get one of those calls, and I answer it, and they say, well, I didn't really think you were going to answer. Well, it's me. Let's talk. And I think that's very important, because if you are closed off and if you're inaccessible to the people, then you are no longer really accountable, are you? So between that, I think regular town halls. We haven't had town halls in our district in 8 long years. It's important to give people the opportunity to ask questions and give feedback.
Yeah, all of those things. The way to stay in tune with the grassroots is just to be still with the people and not allow yourself to think that you're better than, or that you're separated from, or all of a sudden you're in a different class, right? So I think it helps. For me, my district is varied, like every district probably in Texas. I have everything from mobile homes to multi-million dollar homes. And I am never fearful about knocking the door, because this is where I came from, and this is where I'm going. You know, now I live in a beautiful home. And so I feel like I can relate to every class of person that's in my district. I don't feel like I'm better than them, and I never will be. And I've come from nothing and worked very hard for what I have. And I think, and they tell me at the door, they'll be like, why are you running? And I'll tell them, and are you conservative? And I'll tell them. And then they're like, okay, we're going to keep you accountable. And I'm like, okay. And just like Shelby, I'll get emails to my campaign email, and so many emails. Tell Jennifer, da 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 da. And I'm like, who do they think this email's going to? And I return the email real fast, and they're like, oh. I've even had voters who are like not happy with something I did. I don't know. And, tell Jennifer. And then I respond, and they're like, oh, well, they didn't mean to speak so harshly. We're sorry. We just had a long day. And so I just think it's just staying connected with the district and knowing your district and being involved and engaged in your district. Yeah.
Well, it makes my job a lot easier when our candidates do what they say they would do.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, will you support keeping biological women competing only against other women in high school sports?
Yes, I'm raising 2 biological women, and I would like it very much if when they are competing, it is against other biological women.
And then Jennifer?
So that falls right into my issue. I'm not for gender confusion that's being taught in the schools, and I'm 100%, I think it's anti-women. I think it's anti-girls. I'm not for biological men competing with women. If I had a daughter that was, and I did have a daughter that competed in high school swimming, if I had a daughter that was like worked hard her whole life and like did her best, and then she lost to a male, I think my head would spin off. Like, no, I'm not for that. We're going to stop that.
Thank you. And what would you say to conservative college students who feel like they're being shamed and repressed on campus? Jennifer?
Oh, be bold, be brave, right? Like, I just step out and don't be scared. And, sometimes one time I said, hey, would you like a sign in your yard? And they're like, these are adults. They're like, well, no, because we don't want to offend our neighbors. And I'm like, do you think they think that when they put their signs in their yard? They don't think that they're, oh, we don't want to offend our neighbors. So don't be bold, be courageous. We can't be the silent majority. We can't be quiet. I was listening to a speech recently where Reagan said it's war or peace, and peace is surrender. And so we can't surrender. We can't. And I hate that it has to be war, but some issues are war. And we have to stand up. And young people have to stand up. We have to model being courageous as adults. It is our duty, and it will be our legacy. And we have to model it to college, and then college kids have to model it to children. I'm still raising a high schooler who's very confused about what's going on in the world right now. It's very hard for his young mind to resolve all of these crises that are happening. And so he needs young people, college students, to model bravery and model courage. And so I would say you have a role. You have a role as a college student.
I agree with all that, and with the need to be bold, but you've also got to find your tribe and create your people. And I think also for college students, it's really important to get involved, not just in the collegiate chapters, but with local Republican and conservative parties where there's that mentoring relationship and kind of shoring up our youth and preparing them to get involved beyond their college years.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't for the mentors I've had in the Texas conservative movement, I definitely would not be in this position. So to everyone out there who's listening who knows they're one of them, thank you very much for all the time you spent with me. So with that, we have a couple minutes left. So we're going to do a fun question real quick. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
One
Just
superpower?
This isn't a genie, no infinite wishes. One superpower.
So teleporting, because I would be able to teleport, because then I could be like everywhere quickly.
It's good for door knocking.
Yeah, I would. That's what I don't want to read people's minds. I don't. And I don't think I want to be invisible, because then you walk into things and you're like, eek! No, none of those. Sometimes fly, but that seems a little scary, even though, like, anyway, teleporting. That's what I want to do.
It'd be great for door knocking, unless they have one of those cameras on the door, and then it'll freak them out. Shelby, one superpower.
Okay, immediately what I thought was the ability to get to every single door that is going to vote in this runoff.
Somehow no.
But when you mention those doorbells, that's something that you got to be careful with those. And I discovered at Christmas time that as you walk up onto porches, lots of people have signs out with lyrics to Christmas songs, and I'm very susceptible to start singing them as I walk up. And I didn't start looking at first for which of these houses had those doorbells. So I'm convinced that out there is footage of me singing on a porch. I haven't seen it yet, but I know it exists.
Well, if your opponent's listening in, better start digging.
Yeah.
And so with that, as we get to the end, I wanted to give you guys a gift from our political action committee. This is a YCT hat.
Thank
These
you.
are 2 of the 10 currently in existence. Right here's number 3.
Nice.
Very good.
And so with that, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to see if there's any questions on the Facebook Live for us to take.
Okay.
Jordan, can you see if there's any questions left on the note cards? And then if there aren't any, we'll go ahead and conclude. All right, we're still working on Facebook Live as a community.
That gives me hope. If you're still working on it.
I just want to say, since we have time, I just want to say thank you to YCT. I really appreciate this opportunity. I just met Shelby today in person, but we have met via Facebook Messenger and texting before today. I love her. I think she is very like me. We're very similar in a lot of ways. I think she's going to be great, and I'm excited about her and I being 2 of, I hope, of many conservatives that get elected this session. I want the voters to know that I'm for you. I'm for you. I still believe that one person can make a difference. Otherwise, I wouldn't be running. And so I intend to do everything in my power to make a difference and to fight for liberty, to fight for freedom, to fight for families, and to fight for life. And so I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Well, and that's the thing. We need more fighters. And sometimes the way I put it is that I'm an off my seat and on my feet kind of person. And I think that we need more conservatives who are proactively fighting for those things that we believe in. I also like to tell people that when you go and you vote in a presidential election, millions of people are doing that. And so it's like bringing a pinprick. And then when you go and you vote in a state race or in a local race, fewer people turn out. You've got thousands of people who come out to vote there. And in that case, it's like you are bringing a sledgehammer into that voting booth. But when you go vote in a runoff, that electorate narrows significantly because unfortunately fewer people just come back out to vote again. But that makes those votes all that more important. And those people who choose to continue to be involved in the process through that runoff, it is like they are bringing a wrecking ball to the establishment to bring about change. And that is the powerful nature of the votes that are up. And I can't wait for us to begin voting. I love that I'm hearing from people over 65 in the district that they've already mailed their ballots in. Yeah. Check. But we would be remiss if we didn't point out that early voting starts on June 29th and will run through July 10th. And election day will be July 14th. And no doubt we need your help. We are asking for your votes, and Jennifer and I would be honored to serve in the state legislature and fight for our conservative beliefs. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you both for deciding to run. Obviously, it doesn't always go the way we want it to with YCT. Oftentimes we endorse a candidate, they get elected, they start off at 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. Every session they come back a little worse. And then next thing you know, you're endorsing someone else in the district. So thank you guys so much for deciding to run and be bold, courageous conservatives, especially in the environment we're in right now. It means a lot that you guys decided to take the time to visit with YCT and everyone in our Facebook Live community. Thank you for deciding to run and be strong, courageous conservatives. And with that, make sure you go out and support these women in their elections. Early voting starts soon, and I look forward to seeing them in January.